But I will say, and I agree with you 100% that, and I'm not going to name names. I think that some of it is simply engagement farming. I think like some of the constant tweets about it. If you are somebody that follows PulseChain and HEX stuff a lot, you already know who I'm talking about. But the constant tweets about it, constant videos about it. It's starting to just kind of be a LARP, and I said that to him. I think you and I agree on the answer to this proposition. And that doesn't necessarily lead to a long conversation, but I do think we have to have a bit of a conversation on this EHEX, PHEX, HEX on PulseChain, HEX on Ethereum debate. I don't even really know what to call it. But we've had, I mean, this has been the biggest dramedy basically of the last week or so in PulseChain. And for the better part of 2 years, I mean, everywhere I really looked at, I'll let you, I want to hear your thoughts too, but everybody has just kind of assumed parity with these two. Actually, at the point of recording right now, or on our live stream, I should say, we are at the closest gap I have seen in quite a few days here, at about 15% difference between PulseChain HEX and Ethereum HEX. We have PulseChain at about 1.38 cents and EHEX at 1.2 cents roundabout. It was at about 30% difference. So that it's funny, right after everything we've been seeing this past week, the gap has halved actually.
Yeah.
But first off, I mean, like, everybody pretty much talked about these things being in parity. So I have so many angles to this question. So let me just tear that layer off first. Like, for the last 2 years, and now suddenly everything's been reversed. I mean, all that you had basically seen from people covering PulseChain, some of your thoughts, kind of the, Hart's Law, everything being correlated, some of the things Johnny Chaos has been talking about a lot lately, which has been great. I mean, you've really only seen and kind of assumed parity, I assume. Let me know like what you were seeing leading up to all this, what your assumption has been, and kind of your synopsis of how people are reacting a mere 2 weeks after this thing launches.
Okay, so I think it first starts when you see the FUD about let it die, do whatever, stuff like that.
Meaning HEX on Ethereum.
Yeah, the HEX on Ethereum. So, you've got, we'll start with the clips of Richard, many, many times stating that he wants to see HEX expensive on all chains, anywhere that it's at, right? So that's the first thing. And then somebody throws in this clip of him talking about a fork and a divorce. Well, he was addressing Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash when he was talking about that. And, he did say the sum of both chains will always be greater than just the one. But he was referring to Bitcoin Cash wanting to do different things with the block sizes. And, they wanted to make some change. And the regular Bitcoiners didn't want to do that. So in a sense, that divorce was good. But again, you have all these conversations of him stating that he wants to see HEX expensive everywhere. And I think what really transpired was there were a bunch of people that played the market, sold their EHEX, and now they're saying let it die because they don't care about it. And that's what you're seeing. I think that is honestly a lot of what's going on. People speculated early, and they sold a lot of big portions of EHEX, and now they're gone and they don't care about it, and they're saying let it die because they don't have any financial interest in it. So
right,
what do they care? Or they sold out trying to get it lower and make a profit. So there's a couple things there too. A lot of this behavior that you see a lot of times is not benevolent. It's not someone trying to do you a favor. It's trying to get you to get out. It's shaking out weak hands. Exactly. Andrew said it there. Got to get the weak hands out first. And maybe they're hoping to buy lower. Maybe they sold their whole bag. It's EHEX won't die. It's not going to die. You've got whales that have a lot of capital in there that have major 15-year stakes. They're not going to let it die. They're going to protect the price of what they own. And there will be probably some whale games going on, but it's not going anywhere. And I'm not selling any of mine either. Like, I'm not going to, import economic energy from Ethereum over to PulseChain just because it doesn't make sense. You got a copy
Right.
for a reason, and you play those copies smart. If you want to make, I think at this point, longer stakes on PulseChain because the fees will be better, great. Shorter stakes on Ethereum, great. You could also do a lot of the stake pools. There's people forget about those. There's pools out there. The Maximus guys created some of those pools. Get in with a couple other people, and that way you all share the gas. So, there's options, and it's not going anywhere. And again, I just, every time I see it, I shake my head. Are they doing it for views? Are they doing it for clicks? Are we going to stream hours and hours about it just to create some drama? Like, I don't know. It baffles me, for something that we fought so hard for 2.5, 3 years, to suddenly up and say, just let it die.
It's
It
yeah.
doesn't make sense. So no, I'm not going to let it die. And I think there's a lot of others that are, in the same camp. Until Richard Hart comes out and says, I really want everyone to pool their energy. Well, even then, that doesn't mean it's got to happen, because, um, he's not going to dictate what a lot of people decide to do. So, as the values go up and down, the share rates change too. So you have to
Mhm.
understand that if more people leave the Ethereum side, their hex per T-share payout is going to be greater. I still keep in mind that this is a self-balancing system, and the contracts are going to even out. There's going to be arbitrage bots that are going to even stuff out. Yes, they did pull the incentive for the EHEX PHEX pair. I'm
Mhm.
not sure why that was done. I still haven't figured that out yet, but maybe they were waiting till the parity did get a little bit closer to put it back up. I don't know. I still haven't heard the reasoning behind that. Nothing was said about it, but that's my take on it, man. It's just it's not going anywhere. So
I am kind of with you, just kind of, and again, assuming, but like with pulling that liquidity providing pair, I do think it might have been just seeing all of these people that maybe had been, responsible investors in the past that were emergency end staking to bridge over and things like that. Maybe it was just too much too soon. So they felt like it would be in the best interest, try to save people from themselves, kind of a thing. But I will say, and I agree with you 100% that, and I'm not going to name names. I said it to one of the people that I think is doing it, but I think that some of it is simply engagement farming. I think like some of the constant tweets about it. If you are somebody that follows PulseChain and Hex stuff a lot, you already know who I'm talking about. But the constant tweets about it, constant videos about it. It's starting to just kind of be a LARP, and I said that to him. Um, and I don't think he's making it up necessarily, but like to continue going on about it and be like the heel, that guy all of a sudden getting clicks. It just smells funny to me. So I don't know that that person and some of the other people really believe what they're saying all that much. But I do agree with you though, Ewok. I think that you know for every argument people can make that like why is Pulse Chain superior to Ethereum? Yeah, I think you pretty much check every box. But whenever you start to check boxes about the product of Hex and it existing on two very prominent chains now, um, I think you can pretty much sell me on any reason that anybody would take any action on these things. And for so many people to be as long staked out, like you said, for the better part of 3 years, a lot of people in this community making hours and hours long footage of how to stake Hex on Ethereum, how staking works, the Hex contract. They're just not going to give it up. And the people that are doing that right now and actually going like full blown, like black pill and emergency in staking, I do not think are going to be happy with their results in the long run. Obviously, that's probably why so many people are pissed off right now because Hex has been EHEX has been dumping, PHEX has been dumping, PulseChain, PulseX, everything's been dumping.
mhm.
So if you're selling your HEX on Ethereum, I don't know that HEX on Ethereum at this very moment at just over a penny is an exponentially worse buy than anything else in this ecosystem. I mean, I think PulseChain will probably be a better buy at this exact moment in time, but I'm just saying that people are just writing it off. And as long as it has traded so far below the ratio of HEX on PulseChain, which again, that gap is narrowing as we speak as the prices plunge. I just think it's a good buy. So, and the other
Yeah.
thing, I mean, let me, well, go ahead if you had a thought on that because I want to bounce.
No, I agree. I totally agree. I think this Robert Lucas is kind of off. He says he pulled the EHEX PHEX pool because EHEX was bringing down PHEX's liquidity was tied to it, but I don't believe that's what it is. I think there's a lot more economic energy right now. I think there's a lot of people that got in, bought a lot of HEX because they were told to. What's the best thing to buy before the fork? Well, everybody said buy HEX, and then they ended up doing silly things with it. They sold it for DAI or USDC, and then they bridged it over and realized they couldn't do anything anyway. So the people that a lot of people didn't do it the right way. They didn't bridge the HEX over. They sold first, and that did cause the price to come down. So there's a lot of newbies entering the space that don't understand what's really going on, that we're dragging the price down. Now, when there is something new, they're going to trade it off for the other thing. HEX is just as well tied to Pulse and PulseX. So everything was bringing everything down. It wasn't just EHEX. It wasn't just EHEX that was bringing it down. It was everything because of the liquidity that's tied to it. You had a bunch of sacrificers. So I don't know if you want to get into this topic yet or not, but so my take on it was you had a bunch of sacrificers for PulseChain. Most of them were the Richard Hart followers. Most of them have diamond hands, HEX mentality, not going to sell. There was then the PulseX sacrifice, which people started to hear about, and you had a lot more people get in that weren't from that community, that were more, they wanted to see shit happen immediately, overnight. Just there was a lottery ticket mentality. I'm going to buy this. It's going to go up real quick because of all this buy and burn and all this positive news and great things. And, maybe I'll make a 2x or 5x. And, it did go up. I think it went up 2 or 3x there from the beginning, and they sold, which brought everything down because, liquidity's not established enough yet. So when it came down, it brought everything down. And, I still think it was the sacrificers that didn't have the core belief of what Richard has been teaching all along, to hold. You've got to hold through this shit. If you want to see the gains that we saw the last time, you have to put up with the FUD. You've got to put up with the dips. You've got to go, everything that goes with it. You've got to sit through it and not let it bother you. And that didn't happen. So, it's just, that was my take on everything pulling down. And I think maybe that's why the liquidity got pulled from the two, is because it really shouldn't have affected the EHEX price. But it did. And by the time it was pulled, it had already brought it down. So just my take on that whole scenario too. So,
well, I will shout out Robert in the comments there for the one thing, because he kind of he did say one thing that I want to touch on, is that when I'm seeing this debate, which again, yeah, classified as a debate, I guess it is one. I just think that the people that are saying that, well, here's the thing. I'll just say my point. When you're seeing these arguments, nobody's ever really specifying what their point is with HEX on Ethereum. Are you saying that it's dead? Which again, Robert right there was claiming that's not what he's saying. But if you are, though, what does that even mean? Does that mean go to zero? Does that mean just isn't in parity? Are you just saying that it's not going to be in parity with PulseChain? Define parity then. Because, Richard on past streams, and this makes total sense. Like, none of us, and maybe we are all guilty of this, but like when you think of parity, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's got to be like these things are just trading 100% of the time at the exact same price. You know, we talk about like correlation between Bitcoin and the S&P 500 or something like that, or different, you know, correlation in different markets. These things can still, on a long-term chart, be correlated to each other, and there's a highly likely probability they are going to be because they're all part of the same pool. There's a, you know, the same investors are in this, the same liquidity is in this. So just because there was a period 2 weeks into the launch that they were like 30% apart, and again, it may go back there. I'm not saying it's not going to. I'm not saying because the gap is narrowing at this moment that it's not going to go back. But, you know, I've seen Richard on past streams as well say, hey, that can mean at one time, you know, PulseChain is here, HEX is here. Maybe HEX ekes out in front of it a little bit. I mean, imagine that day now when HEX actually is trading it over a 1-to-1 to PulseChain HEX.
I think you're going to see a lot of divergence. I think you're going to have parities where it kind of, you know, it does this and then pivots.
Yeah.
And then pivots again. You're gonna have discrepancy the whole time, because I think there are going to be people that are going to take advantage of the opportunity to buy the cheaper one. The contract's the same. Yes, the gas fees are going to suck on Ethereum, but some people don't care about that. If your bag's big enough, there's a lot of whales that don't care about $1,000 unstake fee. Now, for the small players who are just getting in, yes, I would recommend them to buy on PulseChain because it's more affordable. But what happens when they do a 15-year stake? If we have half of the adoption of Ethereum on PulseChain, you know, the fees could get out of hand. Then we might have to fork it again just to save it. Now, I think Richard can probably make some changes where S-load levels are decreased. It doesn't cost as much to do those transactions. But you know, who knows? I really don't know. It's one of those things where you don't know what's going to happen in that long. 15 years is a long time. So we'll just have to wait and see. But yeah, for the new smaller buyers who want to do smaller stakes, then yes, PulseChain is probably the place to be. But it doesn't mean you probably shouldn't hold a little bit of EX. You may not have to stake it, but you could see some pretty good returns on that side too. So it's just, you know, just my opinion.